I spent 3 years orchestrating a plan to get my awful supervisor fired. Everyone passed the certification except her, and she was gone. I am using an anonymous account because the specifics of this situation are unique and challenging to alter. Previously, I was employed at a hospital data center within the network operations team. Our physical presence in a room adjacent to the servers was required 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to ensure that nothing overheated or ignited, to monitor alerts, and to perform routine tasks such as replacing tape backups. Despite the responsibilities, the work was rather straightforward. Although this role was fundamentally technological, several employees had been with the institution for many years, dating back to when it was necessary to replace printer paper and execute commands from an IBM mainframe. The technology we utilized was highly specialized, making it difficult to transfer those skills elsewhere, resulting in a position that felt stagnant. The presence of individuals who lacked technical proficiency meant that we were not granted significant responsibilities. We could not allow some individuals to access a server while denying that ability to others, thus reducing our team dynamics to the most basic level. We functioned as a network operations center where no one was permitted to engage with any networking equipment. Speaking of the lowest common denominator, allow me to introduce my new supervisor, Karen, not her actual name, but perfectly reflective of her essence. She had been with the organization for over 2 decades and earned her position solely through tenure. She exhibited traits of a narcissistic sociopath and was among the least pleasant individuals I have ever met. Shortly after my employment began, our hospital was acquired, leading to a merger of data centers. Karen was demoted to shift lead and was required to work alongside us in the continuous rotation. She struggled significantly in her position, and our responsibilities dwindled considerably. We lacked the authority to resolve any issues independently, as it had to be something Karen could address, and she was both apathetic and incompetent. After a couple of years, I received a promotion. On my first day following the announcement, she stated directly to me, "You will fail." However, she possessed a potent resource, the hospital's bureaucratic system. The institution was unionized, which meant that employee terminations had to be justified by cause rather than being at will, even for non-union employees. While this policy can be seen as beneficial, it led to absurd situations in which job loss was only viable under truly egregious offenses, or if someone was notably intoxicated. We had an individual who stole computer equipment yet retained their job, which was absurd. Having been there for almost 30 years, Karen was not going to be terminated without substantial efforts. That was acceptable. Her job performance was dismal. A critical aspect of our position involved monitoring alerts that would arise, which required us to follow a specific procedure to ensure critical data was processed. Failure to adhere to this procedure would result in a nurse not receiving necessary lab results. On one occasion, an alert occurred, Karen acknowledged it, and then chose to continue browsing the internet. Consequently, a patient in the cardiac intensive care unit was preparing for surgery, and the medical team could not obtain a crucial white blood cell count, which posed a significant risk to this patient, ultimately resulting in their death. Yet, Karen was not terminated. The justification from human resources, it didn't directly result in harm. She exhibited no remorse. She truly was devoid of empathy. Though I am typically pro-worker, there are certain positions where diligence is non-negotiable. I was incensed. She needed to be removed. I meticulously documented every mistake she made. This was not trivial. We were discussing matters of life and death. I issued verbal warnings, followed by the first written warning, second written warning, final written warning, and ultimately termination. It was a cumbersome process that I would have preferred to avoid, but it was necessary. Then, she discovered how to exploit the system. As the threat of termination loomed, she would inform human resources that she was being harassed. The individual allegedly harassing her varied with each instance, which would initiate a mandatory investigation. These investigations could last around 6 months, during which nothing would be uncovered, and we would continue as usual. Unfortunately, these warnings had a 6-month shelf life, allowing her to reset the cycle whenever it approached. Everyone felt powerless. Even the chief information officer could not intervene due to the bureaucratic structure. Karen was a disruptive force, and the entire IT department had to collaborate with the data center personnel, meaning interactions with her were unavoidable, and she was universally disliked. With another 2 decades until her retirement, it seemed she would outlast any attempts to remove her. Then, I devised a plan. What if I required everyone in the Network Operations Center to pass the Network Plus certification exam under the pretense of enhancing skills relevant to the 21st century? The exam is not particularly challenging, but it is not merely a walk in the park either. I was fairly confident that all team members were capable of passing except for Karen. We would enhance job titles, provide significant pay raises, and grant increased responsibilities with the equipment, something that everyone wanted desperately. This shift would equip individuals with transferable skills, allowing them to pursue other opportunities should they desire, alleviating feelings of entrapment. I spent 3 long years in discussions with human resources, my director, the CIO, and additional meetings with HR. We engaged in job description revisions that consumed hours for minor adjustments. It was an exhausting ordeal filled with bureaucratic obstacles. Have you ever tried to secure approval for a substantial raise in such a bureaucratic environment? These raises were essential, asking employees to pass a test or lose their job. Without significant incentives would likely lead to unrest. Eventually, approval was granted. I also included the exam requirement in my own job description. It was necessary to continue performing my responsibilities and ensuring my skills remained sharp following my promotion. This also allowed me to cover for colleagues who were on leave due to vacation or illness. Plus, I also received that desirable increase in salary. The implementation went smoothly. Although I felt nervous, the plan was logical and clearly communicated. Employees would become more marketable, their work would become more engaging, and most importantly, they would earn 20% more than prior. I believe it significantly helped that I assigned the same requirement to myself, despite having the option to exclude myself. The hospital funded off-site training, and employees would continue to receive their full hourly wages during these sessions, inclusive of shift differentials for second and third shifts. We covered all necessary materials. I allocated 8 hours per week for individuals to find a quiet place to study. The job inherently had ample downtime allowing for studying, but this arrangement provided formally designated time. We covered exam fees, and if someone did not pass, we funded a second attempt. 8 months were allocated for passing the test, ensuring Karen would have no excuse to argue that the process was hurried or inequitable. Everyone successfully passed the exam on their first attempt, with the exception of Karen. She failed her second attempt, and her third attempt, a bonus opportunity. Being a classic narcissist, Karen believed this entire situation was somehow aimed solely at her. She maintained that this was an elaborate conspiracy orchestrated over several years and countless hours, specifically designed to eliminate her from the workplace, adamantly informing anyone within earshot of this belief. Sure, Karen, because that doesn't sound delusional at all. Not everything revolves around you, however, in this instance, it does. Only I and 2 other individuals were privy to the true nature of the situation. I distinctly remember the moment we informed her. She was in utter denial that such an outcome could ever occur. She believed she was invulnerable. I do not think I will ever achieve a sense of satisfaction in my career that equals this moment. Typically, I don't take pleasure in witnessing someone's livelihood being taken away, but her unique brand of awfulness and the decade of enduring her behavior left me utterly frustrated. The day after her termination, I was hailed as a hero. Upon visiting the main office for a meeting, colleagues congratulated me as if I had just welcomed a newborn or completed a marathon. Even the chief information officer expressed happiness for me, relieved that I no longer had to oversee Karen. However, in my mind, they were applauding me for orchestrating this intricate scheme. Morale back at the data center soared. We acquired new knowledge. A few coworkers ventured on to better opportunities. Those content to remain did so, and we all enjoyed increased salaries and job security. Moreover, the stress associated with Karen's potential for filing frivolous harassment complaints dissipated, allowing for a more relaxed work environment. New employees were regaled with tales of Karen, which seemed exaggerated but were entirely factual. In order to address an incredibly significant issue, I successfully executed a vast workplace initiative that enhanced the lives of my colleagues while simultaneously ensuring the safety of our patients. Facilitating Karen's termination stands as my most significant and challenging accomplishment, and it is not something I can include on a resume. Story 2. I questioned our future after he revealed his belief in God was a deal-breaker. We ended things despite love. How did it come to this? Hello, Reddit. I was uncertain about sharing this, but honestly, I feel utterly lost and heartbroken at the moment, and could use any advice or support from those who have experienced something similar. I will do my best to provide ample context and details so you can grasp the situation fully, so please bear with me. I, a 27-year-old female, had been in a relationship with my boyfriend, who is 32 years old, for roughly 6 months. We connected immediately, and it felt incredible similar interests, mutual attraction, and aligning love languages, among other things. This relationship seemed unique compared to previous ones, and I felt like he could be the one for me. Early in our relationship, we faced significant challenges together. My brother passed away tragically, and shortly after, his dog of 9 years also died. We offered each other immense support during that tough time, which reinforced my feelings for him and the bond we shared. I believed we were on the same wavelength regarding our future. We both communicated that we were dating with the idea of marriage, and I truly envisioned us creating something beautiful together. However, he made a comment that completely altered that perception. 3 weeks ago, I inquired if he could see himself marrying again and what that would entail for him, to which he replied affirmatively, with God being central to that vision. Since I am agnostic, I was taken aback because we had discussed our beliefs earlier on, and he had never indicated that sharing his faith was essential, only that he desired respect for it. When I asked why we were still dating if that was the case, he responded that we were merely getting to know each other. This left me feeling insecure and confused, unsure of what to think anymore. It felt as if we were both aiming toward marriage, yet his words seemed contradictory. I have been grappling with these uncertainties since then, unsure if it was unreasonable of me to seek clarity, or if he was justified in wanting to continue getting to know each other without considering the larger picture at this stage. I recognized that many couples with different beliefs could make their relationships work and be quite happy, including my late brother and his partner. I just didn't want to invest all my energy and emotions into someone who did not believe our relationship had potential. At one point, I attempted to set my doubts aside, but I kept returning to the reality that I was dating with the intention of marriage, leading me to question our purpose. Just a few days ago, it was his birthday, and I took him out to dinner. I had been feeling unsettled for several weeks, primarily due to work-related stress and uncertainties in our relationship. When he asked what was bothering me, I didn't want to spoil his day, so I suggested we discuss it later. Admittedly, my expressions reveal everything, and I find it difficult to conceal my feelings. I was acting distant, quieter than usual, and lost in thought. He noticed, insisting on knowing what was wrong. I told him I wasn't comfortable discussing it at the restaurant and suggested waiting until we were alone. During the car ride, I confided in him that I felt emotionally disconnected and was unsure about our status and his thoughts. I longed for a deeper connection, like we had intended with our trauma bonding session over a drink. But his remarks about marriage and his apparent lack of future planning concerning me deeply troubled me. I expressed needing emotional connection from my partner, wanting to feel accepted and chosen entirely, especially after discussing traumatic experiences, and I asked for his perspective. He preferred to wait until the next day to talk after work, stating he would be off at 3:30 p.m. When I dropped him off at his residence, I felt bewildered and uneasy. Despite our serious discussion, he still wanted to cuddle and watch a movie, and I couldn't shake the feeling that being physically intimate after such a heavy conversation felt inappropriate. Eventually, I relented and cuddled with him, but after a while, he stopped, leaving me feeling rejected and used. I ended up leaving shortly after I started to cry. The following day, I found myself in a very low emotional state, so I took the day off work for some much-needed self-care. 3:30 p.m. came and went without a word from him. I didn't even receive the usual good morning text or a call after he got off work. It wasn't until I texted him that, since I hadn't heard from him, I could only assume it was over. He replied with a firm no, explaining it had been a hectic day, and asked if he could come over after his birthday dinner with friends I had planned to attend, but assumed I had been uninvited. I agreed, and that evening when he arrived, we engaged in a long conversation. I cried extensively, and he appeared angry and intense. He revisited past issues that I believed we had already resolved, and for which he had apologized, both from the early stages of our relationship, such as when he didn't communicate changes in his plans, which I found disrespectful, leading to me being dismissive when I answered his call. I recognized my behavior was unwarranted, apologized for it, and had not repeated such actions since. There was also a time when I joked. His Christian values were showing, realized it hurt him, and apologized for that insensitivity. When I asked if he could envision a future with me, he answered affirmatively. When I inquired if he could see himself loving me, he responded yes again. However, when I pressed him on whether he could see himself marrying me, he said no. He stressed that his beliefs were central to every aspect of his life and values, and that he wanted his partner to believe in something that lasts beyond this life. He implied that he thought I viewed his beliefs as foolish and unreasonable, which I have never believed nor communicated to him. He then inquired if I would be open to our children attending church. We had previously discussed this, and I stated that I would be comfortable with it provided they were also allowed to learn about other religions and make their own choices. It was crucial to me that they were not forced to conform to a specific belief system. Then he asked whether I would agree to a joint bank account. I admitted I had not thought much about it before, but I had heard of some couples maintaining separate accounts for specific purposes like a date night fund, yet it wasn't a deal breaker for me. Next, he asked if I would mind if he donated to the church, to which I replied that it would be acceptable, as I was well aware of the significance the church held for him and wanted to support him. At this juncture, I felt as if he was searching for reasons to challenge me, leaving me confused about why he was so tense and upset. He didn't raise his voice during our discussion, but I had never witnessed such emotion from him before. I understood his faith was highly important to him and was central to his identity, yet I had no idea it carried this weight or that it could hinder our future together. I had made every effort to compromise with him throughout the relationship because I wanted it to succeed so desperately. To me, he was worth fighting for. At that moment, I questioned whether he was checked out of the relationship and if there was anything I could do or say that might change his mind. He replied no, insisting there was no future for us. The heartbreak felt overwhelming, particularly as he told me I was the best partner he had ever had, but then added that if I didn't believe him when he said he still cared, then I didn't truly know him. I conveyed my desire to keep working on our relationship, and that if he was choosing to end it, the decision was ultimately his. He retorted, "Fine, make me the villain." He requested a hug before departing, but I felt so shattered that I was unable to hug him. I told him I couldn't embrace someone who was breaking up with me, and then he left. Since that moment, I have not heard from him. I am grappling with an array of emotions right now: sorrow, rage, confusion, and I feel profoundly brokenhearted. Everything else about our relationship was incredible. And while I acknowledge I didn't detail those aspects here as it would lengthen the post considerably, I felt that we were extraordinarily well matched and firmly wanted to make it succeed. I struggled to comprehend why he allowed our relationship to continue for so long. If he recognized we fundamentally disagreed on something he was not willing to compromise about. I invested all my energy into this relationship, thoughtful planning for dates and gifts, expressing how handsome he is and how thrilled I am to be with him, texting him during the day to let him know I was thinking of him and looking forward to seeing him, showing physical affection, surprising him with his favorite foods on tough days, being present during our time together, and supporting him as best I could. At no moment did I give him any cause to question my commitment and feelings for him. Had it been possible, I would have given him the world. I believed I was being respectful of his beliefs, that I was a fantastic partner and someone he might view as a potential spouse. I felt it strongly for him, and I continue to do so. I am trying to make sense of what happened, whether he experienced a change of heart, if he withheld the truth from me, or perhaps thought I would eventually align with his beliefs. I question why he didn't articulate his complete expectations earlier if he had already known. Thoughts of him constantly occupy my mind, and it feels torturous. I am torn between whether I should reach out and see how he feels, and if there might be a way forward, or simply wait, attempt to move on, or see if he tries to reconnect. Has anyone else gone through something similar, where fundamental differences, such as those in religious beliefs, created such a divide, and was able to overcome it and find a middle ground? Perhaps there is no hope, and honestly, I would find it hard to accept that. All I know is that I miss him profoundly, I love him, and I care about him deeply, leaving me feeling incredibly shattered. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I recognize it was lengthy, but I truly value your thoughts and guidance. Story 3. After quitting my stingy boss Eugene, I reported him for unpaid contributions, leading to hefty fines for his deceit. Sweet revenge. Let us refer to my unpleasant boss as Eugene, as his frugality reminds me of Eugene Krabs from SpongeBob SquarePants, though Krabs is not nearly as malicious. To convey the full extent of this revenge, I will recount a few, though not exhaustive, actions Eugene took that earned him the title of a complete jerk. For context, Eugene operates a modest company that offers artistic services and has never hired full-time employees, which I later discovered was due to his miserly nature. Initially, I believed the open part-time position was perfect for me, given my other commitments and the need for some income. The position offered approximately $550 USD per month. I do not reside in the United States. This is a rough conversion, but only required around 90 hours of work each month. Although it was not an exceptional offer, it sufficed for me as I viewed myself as inexperienced in the field. It is worth noting that Eugene had reviewed my portfolio and was aware of my skill level before bringing me on board. The first few months went smoothly. I worked the required hours and was compensated accordingly, occasionally extending my shifts on my own volition due to the nature of the job, which did not bother me. I suppose Eugene perceived this as an opportunity he could exploit later in my tenure. It is also noteworthy that Eugene frequently inquired about my well-being and how I spent my weekends, but at that time, I considered it mere small talk and did not give it much thought. He would ask about my previous job and why I had left, to which I frankly responded that their work system did not suit me. This detail would prove significant later. Gradually, Eugene started to exhibit increasing impatience toward me, often attributing my shortcomings to a lack of effort. Remember my inexperience reflecting the pay rate. Eugene possessed over a decade in this field and anticipated that I should reach his level after only 3 months. The pressure mounted, forcing me to work longer hours just to keep pace and deliver the highest quality work possible. I was under the impression that my hard work would speak for itself. Despite it being a part-time role, I overcommitted and took pride in my output, while my external commitments struggled to keep up. I felt exhausted, but believed I was performing well until Eugene had a conversation with me one day. Eugene summoned me to his office and reprimanded me regarding my work ethic, suggesting that I was not exerting sufficient effort and that he was contemplating terminating my employment. At that moment, I was thoroughly confused. Did he genuinely fail to recognize the effort I was putting in? Was I delusional for thinking that I was performing adequately and improving? I attempted to express my concerns, but he quickly shifted the discussion, claiming he understood the reason my former employer disliked me. He asserted it was because I was lazy and uncommitted. To say I was astonished is an understatement. I believed I had put forth my best effort with each task assigned to me, and Eugene had used my vulnerabilities captured during casual chats against me. I was unsure how to respond, and simply inquired about what he expected from me. He promptly replied that he wanted me to double my hours while maintaining the same monthly salary. His reasoning: it was my fault for being inexperienced and unable to produce high-quality work. Thus, it was my responsibility to make up for it with my own time. My outside commitments were irrelevant, he asserted, as this job was my sole source of income and should take precedence. At that moment, it became clear to me that Eugene was a narcissistic sociopath who engaged in conversations solely to identify a person's weaknesses for manipulation. As indicated in my title, Eugene was not merely a narcissist, but also extremely stingy. Eugene is intent on maximizing his profits. While I agree that any business owner would appreciate that, Eugene's methods are unethical and may even be illegal. He would provide a service to a client, and upon receiving the deposit, deliver something entirely different. He was astute enough to draft vague contracts for both clients and employees that left no room for legal action against him. More often than not, his clients found themselves frustrated, realizing too late and at a high cost that they had been deceived. Eugene would then demand an additional payment to deliver what he had initially promised, overcharging clients by an average of 100% to 200% more than agreed upon. Upon realizing they had been taken advantage of, most clients were too drained to pursue further action and merely wished for the project to conclude, so they wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. This inaction likely bolstered Eugene's ego, leading him to believe he could continually engage in unscrupulous behavior without consequence. There are many more grievances I wish to air regarding Eugene, but given that this is a revenge forum, not a recruitment agency, I will move on to the more exciting aspects. In my country, employers are mandated to contribute a certain amount for each local employee they hire. While it is not technically a tax, it is a legal requirement, and neglecting this obligation results in substantial fines and potentially jail time. These contributions are essentially payments toward the employee's retirement fund, which every employer must handle. Employers can deduct a small percentage of the contributions from employees' wages. This law carries its own complexities, particularly with certain groups exempted from it, such as students or interns. Eugene exemplifies the classic narcissist who believes he is smarter than everyone around him. He fancied himself clever enough to evade the law by drafting contracts with vague stipulations to shield himself, and was deluded enough to think that as long as he sounded convincing, people would accept his narrative. In simpler terms, he viewed people as vegetables lacking independent thought. If anyone were to have an opinion, it had to align with his, or it was deemed incorrect. I remained with Eugene's company for approximately 4 months before feeling overwhelmed mentally. On the day I resigned, I called to check on my contribution account, and just as I anticipated, Eugene had not paid a single cent over those 4 months. The representative on the other end of the line inquired if I wished to report this as a case. I think my answer was obvious. A week later, I received an update from the contribution board, stating that Eugene had disputed my claim, arguing that I was merely an intern and therefore exempt from the law. This jerk was fighting dirty as a last-ditch effort to steal from me. As I previously mentioned, Eugene believed himself to be a smart man and likely thought the officer would rule in his favor, given his persuasive skills and the loopholes in his vague contract. Fine, Eugene. So you think you can evade accountability as you have in the past? You must be feeling quite confident by now. Well, not this time, Eugene. I composed a lengthy 2-page email to the contribution board officer, outlining all the reasons and evidence to disprove Eugene's claim that I was an intern. Knowing his usual tactics, I went the extra mile to research all the exempt categories and provided every reason to demonstrate that I did not fall into any of them. Excessive? Yes. Worth it? Absolutely. I did not hear from the officer for 2 weeks, and when I finally did, he informed me that Eugene had agreed to pay my contributions. Remember how employers are allowed to deduct a certain percentage from employees' wages. Due to his negligence, Eugene could no longer do so and had to pay the full amount, plus any incurred fines. Had he followed the law, it would have only cost him 1/3 of what he eventually had to pay. So that's a little extra for you, Eugene. Now that I have reclaimed what was rightfully mine, I have decided to move on, but the story does not end there. An ex-colleague, NJ, who still works for Eugene, informed me that during the 2 weeks I was waiting for a response from the officer, Eugene was desperately fighting to maintain his position, providing every rationale to claim I was exempt. The officer, having reviewed my email, quickly grew tired of Eugene's nonsense and set a deadline for him to settle the issue or face court. NJ mentioned he had never seen Eugene so defeated before. Additionally, it appeared that karma had finally caught up with him as he began losing more clients due to his unethical actions. The fines hit him during a month when he had no clients, resulting in a significant impact on his finances. Ultimately, while the amount may not have been monumental, considering Eugene's stinginess and pride, I believe the consequences were sufficient to warrant attention in this forum. Edit my first award. Thank you so much for the silver.